Hot. It's 5:05 and welcome into a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour on News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Well, as we continue to track relief in Western North Carolina, Destin Hall, who is the newly elected Speaker of the North Carolina House of Representatives, has announced the official formation of a select committee on Hurricane Helene recovery. In a press release on Friday, Hall said, Hurricane Helene caused widespread devastation across North Carolina, and it's our duty to ensure impacted communities have the resources they need to rebuild stronger than before. The bipartisan committee, filled with both Republicans and Democrats, has 44 members appointed by Hall and is established under the rules of the House governing the 2025 legislative session. The committee is slated to assess recovery efforts, identify resource gaps, and ensure state and federal assistance is delivered to those who need it. Committee members will work with local leaders, emergency management officials, and nonprofit organizations to support those continued recovery and rebuilding efforts. The chairs of the committee are co-chairs, I should say, are Representative John Bell from Wayne County and Representative Dudley Green from Avery County. There are a bunch of vice chairs that serve out in the western half of the state as well, including Representative Balcom, Clampett, Gillespie, Jake Johnson is in there as well, Mark Pless, and a couple of other vice chairs from western North Carolina. Hall continued in his press release by saying, "We are fully committed to Western North Carolina, and we will see through this recovery to the very end. And this committee will play a vital role in providing the oversight and leadership needed to ensure a strong and lasting recovery." The committee is slated to begin work immediately and provide regular updates and recommendations to the General Assembly. Yet another appropriations bill is expected to be announced shortly. The General Assembly is back in Raleigh coming up at 2 weeks from this Wednesday. They're back on the 29th of the month, so right before we kick over the calendar to February. With that, the General Assembly has already passed 3 separate rounds of disaster relief funding, with more than $1 billion in state tax dollars appropriated for that disaster relief and recovery. The remaining committee members appointed by Hall and the rules for the committee were published and available. You can read more details on our website this morning, carolinajournal.com. The committee will dissolve on May the 1st or at any time by the Speaker. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. Of course, Governor Josh Stein announcing his group called GROW NC, dealing with the disaster relief and recovery from the governor's side. We will. This will be a continual topic as the General Assembly gavels back in here in a few weeks. We're keeping a close eye on it right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:08, News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. We continue to track details out of the high-stakes race for the North Carolina Supreme Court. We did get an update late in the day on Friday, and that's one of our breaking stories this morning over at carolinajournal.com. To get some additional details on that, it's my pleasure to welcome back Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation. Mitch, you've been walking us through this for the last couple of weeks now. What happened on Friday, and can you explain that to everybody this morning?
Sure. The significant development was that the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals decided to schedule an oral argument in this case on January 27th. And that was in response to a request from the Democrat in this election, Allison Riggs, an appointed incumbent. She had looked at the schedule that the Fourth Circuit had, which called for some briefing that would extend into March, and said, hey, let's really expedite this process. The state Supreme Court comes back to hear cases on February 11th. And as the person who believes she has won and believes she has the legitimate right to the seat, she'd like to be able to say that she's the official winner by the time the state Supreme Court comes back and hears cases on February 11th. So that's what she has asked for, is to have some sort of decision by February 11th. A January 27th oral argument could allow that to happen. Now, significantly, as that was scheduled, the Fourth Circuit did not say anything about the State Board of Elections' request to block an earlier ruling from a federal trial judge. What had happened at the beginning of the week was that Chief U.S. District Judge Richard Myers, who had had the case in his courtroom, decided that he shouldn't deal with this case, but that it was a state court issue and that it should go back to the state Supreme Court. So Myers sent the case back to the state Supreme Court. The State Board of Elections doesn't like that. They're the ones who initially moved it out of the Supreme Court and into federal court. And they've asked the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to order Judge Myers to take the case back from the state Supreme Court. Fourth Circuit hasn't done that. Now, the Fourth Circuit didn't say that it wouldn't do that, but it said it's not going to take any other actions until after this oral argument on January 27th. Now, meanwhile, the case is in the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court issued an order blocking the State Board of Elections from certifying Allison Riggs as the winner in the case. That was initially scheduled to happen on Friday. Didn't happen on Friday. It's not going to happen, at least for a little while. The state Supreme Court also set out a briefing schedule that will have all the sides in this case filing their competing arguments, and that lasts through January 24th. So briefing will be done before the state Supreme Court by January 24th. A ruling could come from the Supreme Court as soon as that day, but probably not that day, although it could be very soon afterward. And then 3 days after the briefing ends, there is when the Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, will hold its oral argument with presumably some sort of decision not too long afterward. So it's going to be at least a little while longer before we have resolution of this case, but at least the timeline is becoming a little bit clearer. Everything should be done in terms of all of the paperwork at the state Supreme Court by January 24th, and then 3 days later on the 27th, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals will hold an oral argument, and then there should be some decisions shortly afterward. And of course, the Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals could make a decision that would render moot what the state Supreme Court does. So we'll have to watch very closely.
That was going to be part of my question here as you discuss that timeline coming up in the latter parts of January. And I want to make sure that I understand and our listeners are clear with this. The Fourth Circuit is not deciding whether or not these 60,000 ballots that we've talked about for the last couple of weeks are valid or not. They're discussing whether this should be in state jurisdiction or federal jurisdiction, correct?
That's exactly right. What the argument is before the Fourth Circuit is that Chief Judge Richard Myers should not have sent the case back to the state Supreme Court. There's some procedural questions about how he did it and whether he gave the state board an opportunity to respond to his arguments. So basically, the argument before the Fourth Circuit is not about Republican candidate Jefferson Griffin's challenges in this case. The argument is about whether this case belongs in federal court because some of the issues here deal with federal law, or whether it's an issue that can remain in state court. Judge Myers decided, hey, this is a state court issue. I shouldn't deal with it. The State Board of Elections disagrees and wants the Fourth Circuit to rule in its favor and force the case back to Judge Myers. Meanwhile, the state Supreme Court is going to be dealing with this issue unless the Fourth Circuit or Judge Myers tells them otherwise.
Yeah, and the very compressed timeline here. And so to flip that coin over to the other side, the issue that the actual North Carolina State Supreme Court is dealing with is actually the ballots themselves and these arguments over valid IDs and things like that. They're actually touching the root matter of this lawsuit, correct?
Eventually, the first item of business for the state Supreme Court is whether to issue what's called a writ of prohibition. Okay. And the writ of prohibition would block the State Board of Elections from certifying the election. Now, to get to that decision, they're going to have to get to the exact issues that you were talking about, the various reasons for the challenges. If they see that there's some merit in these challenges from Jefferson Griffin, then they could issue the writ of prohibition. If they don't see enough merit, or if, like Justice Richard Dietz, they say there is some merit here, but we shouldn't be changing these election rules after the election took place, they might just say, no, we're not going to allow anything to move forward here. The State Board of Elections could go ahead and certify Riggs as the winner, and things will be done.
Mitch, we appreciate the time and the update this morning. Mitch Kokai joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:14, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. It's time for a look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick.
And welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour, 5:20 on a Monday morning. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Tracking some other statewide news this morning, former North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson's defamation lawsuit against CNN faces a motion to dismiss, with the cable news network arguing that Robinson has failed to meet the legal standard for proving actual malice. That's the challenge his legal team has put forward in regards to dismissing the lawsuit. It stems from a September CNN article just weeks before the election alleging Robinson posted controversial comments on a pornographic website over a decade ago. CNN's filing argues that Robinson's claims are implausible, relying on political rhetoric and insufficient evidence. The network defends its investigation method, detailing how journalists linked this online username from well over a decade ago to Robinson through matching email addresses, biographical data, and writing style. CNN asserts that Robinson's public figure status necessitates higher proof of malice, which they claim he has not yet provided. Robinson accuses CNN of publishing the defamatory statements for political purposes during his gubernatorial campaign, which he ultimately lost by 800,000 votes, 15 percentage points in the November election. He also alleges that the article caused reputational harm, and Robinson's suit, while it initially sought $50 million in damages, was amended to comply with North Carolina court rules. Additionally, the lawsuit targets an individual by the name of Louis Money, who released a music video that did call out Robinson and accused both CNN and Money of coordinating attacks to harm his election prospects. Both defendants have filed motions to dismiss, with CNN labeling the suit as a political theater and arguing it is protected under the First Amendment principles. This case does remain under federal court jurisdiction, with a February the 17th deadline for various responses to be back in the court. That is a story that we are continuing to track right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:23. Over the weekend, while winter weather did cause some issues across the state, some events being delayed or canceled, including the inauguration ceremony and celebration for, the celebration and party for now Democrat North Carolina Governor Josh Stein. He did give an inaugural address Saturday afternoon to a small crowd inside the North Carolina State Capitol building. That happened in Raleigh. His theme during that event was being North Carolina strong. And keeping that thread on North Carolina strong, Stein started out in comments about relief in Western North Carolina.
Our people are good, and they are ready to meet any challenge. They are North Carolina strong. North Carolina strong means supporting our neighbors in Western North Carolina the same way that they are supporting each other. We must fast track getting people back into their homes as quickly as possible. We must support small business owners so they can keep powering our economy for the decades to come. And we must rebuild water systems, roads, bridges, and dams so they are resilient and can withstand future natural disasters. That's why each of my first 6 executive orders cut through red tape to help people rebuild quicker.
And we spent some time talking about those 6 executive orders back when it was just one day into Josh Stein being the governor, in which he made his way out to Asheville, meeting with folks out in that area of the state and signing those executive orders dealing with, of course, we're dealing with Helene relief out in the western half of North Carolina, dealing with removing government red tape and getting recovery efforts rolling there at a quick level. And of course, you're seeing this at 2 different levels now. You've got what the governor is doing in Josh Stein, and also what the General Assembly is going to be doing as well. As we talked about earlier, Destin Hall, the Speaker of the House, announcing a select committee on Hurricane Helene recovery. So that was how he started off part of his comments in Raleigh. He also then talked about the economic opportunity in the state, and not just for select impact individuals, but for the state as a whole. Here's more from Josh Stein on Saturday.
North Carolina Strong means economic opportunity for everyone, because where you come from should never limit how far you can go. That's the promise of North Carolina. Every North Carolinian should have a fair shot at prosperity, to start a small business or get a good-paying job everywhere in our state, including small-town North Carolina. So we must create more good-paying jobs, cut taxes for working people, strengthen our workforce, and invest in broadband, roads and railroads, ports and airports to keep North Carolina moving. North Carolina Strong means opening the doors of opportunity to every child. There is no better investment in our future than providing excellent pre-K so that every child starts kindergarten healthy and ready to learn. We have to be smart about how we teach reading and how to utilize our most effective educators. But as long as North Carolina ranks 48th in the country in per pupil investment, our public school students will be denied the sound basic education that our state constitution guarantees them. To recruit and retain the best, we must provide our public school teachers and staff real pay raises.
That's Josh Stein in Raleigh on Saturday, his inauguration address with the theme North Carolina Strong. Those events were delayed and changed due to the winter weather that affected the state Friday into Saturday. There was supposed to be a block party and some other events that took place that didn't happen, so it ended up taking place in the old state capitol building in Raleigh for Josh Stein, talking about teacher pay, something that was always an issue with his predecessor in Democrat Governor Roy Cooper, and is likely to, at least from Stein's initial comments there, likely to be something that he continues to battle with the General Assembly over as well. He then turned his attention to talking about crime and safety, a major issue across bipartisan political lines leading up to the November election.
North Carolina Strong means keeping people safe. No one should worry when their kids are at school or at play, or whether their loved ones are safe when they are at work or at worship. That's why we need more well-trained law enforcement officers in our neighborhoods keeping our families safe. And we must keep up our fight against the fentanyl crisis to protect families from the heartbreak of overdose. Too many people are dying. So we must smash drug trafficking rings peddling this poison. We must also reduce stigma so that more people seek treatment. And I'm grateful to Anna, our First Lady, for embracing people suffering from the chronic diseases of substance use disorder and mental illness.
We'll have some more audio from Josh Stein coming up here in just a few minutes. It's now 5:28 on the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We'll get another look at traffic on this Monday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick.
It's 5:35. You're listening to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT, streaming live on our YouTube channel this morning over at Carolina Journal. If you miss any portion of the show, we encourage you to download the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. It's available wherever you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap that subscribe and follow button, and take the show with you on demand on your own time. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. North Carolina homeowners will know the results of a request made by the North Carolina Rate Bureau to raise homeowner insurance rates an average of 42% in the next week or so, according to North Carolina Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey. The North Carolina Rate Bureau represents private insurance companies that were seeking that 42% increase statewide. There was a hearing which got underway back on October the 7th of last year, and it recently wrapped up. With that, state law gives the insurance commissioner 45 days to issue an order once the hearing concludes. In a phone interview last week, Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey told the Carolina Journal, quote, "We've been in court since October 7th, and it's been a grueling process. It's a hardship not only on our staff, but I heard a lot of complaints from the Rate Bureau and the insurance industries about the cost. That's something back during the campaign that my opponent, former Democrat state senator Natasha Marcus, was attacking me on all the time, calling me Rate Hype Mike and comments and saying that I'm not transparent. Well, that's the furthest thing from the truth, because there's a process that has to be followed no matter who the commissioner is, and the public comment period is something we always have." Causey said once they find out about a proposed rate hike, they notify the press and ask for public comment. Most, if not all, say they don't want their rates increased, that being from the public comment standpoint. When that occurs by state law, the insurance commissioner sets up a court hearing date about 10 months out. In the meantime, as granted by state law, the insurance commissioner can negotiate settlements if the insurance industry is willing to enter into those negotiations. When settlements were negotiated, he said that they have been favorable to consumers. That means a win for consumers and the state, which can save on lengthy court costs for a lengthy hearing. This time, however, both sides were very far apart, he told the Carolina Journal, so they couldn't make any progress in negotiations. Causey told us, quote, "They, being the Rate Bureau, came back telling me that it's costing them $5,000 an hour for court." He said you could spend $1 to $2 million in a court case and come out far worse what you can do if you reach some sort of settlement. I hope that we'll have a public announcement here in the next week or two as to where we are. This request was made all the way back 1 year ago, January of 2024. A multitude of homeowners and others from across the state voiced their concerns on a public comment forum, which happened on January the 22nd, back 1 year ago, as well as by email. As expected, no one was in favor of higher rate increases. Some areas on the eastern half of the state, like places like Emerald Isle Beach, could be seeing a rate increase hike of 99% for homeowners insurance. With those in the mountains, this of course was all before Helene, seeing some of the lowest increases between 4 and 20%. Causey said that he has heard from legislatures and some members of the public that homeowners insurance rates have already gone up, despite an announcement not being made about the final decision from the hearing. He said that the state legislature passed a law a year ago called the Consent to Rate Act, which, in agreement between the insurer and the policyholder, where those holders agree to pay a premium greater than established by the insurance premium set by the Rate Bureau. Causey said that the legislature passed that law to prevent companies from leaving North Carolina or stating that they would not write homeowners insurance policies. So we are expecting some additional details in the next week or so, according to North Carolina Insurance Commissioner Mike Causey. We'll have those details as soon as we get them right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. It's now 5:40, News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT. More from Josh Stein as he spent some time on Saturday, a small group meeting inside the North Carolina State Capitol building in Raleigh, where he gave his inaugural address. Those plans were shifted pretty dramatically due to winter weather affecting the state. We already heard about Western North Carolina recovery, economic opportunity, as well as crime and safety. And for all of that, Josh Stein says it is imperative that he and Republicans in the General Assembly work across the aisle. Take a listen.
Working together across our differences to get things done. And so to the members of the General Assembly, I say, let's work together. We have real problems to solve, and we do not have time to settle petty political scores or fight divisive culture wars. I want to stand with you as we fight for our people, not with each other. No party has all the answers. Good ideas do not come with party labels. When we work together, we are stronger, and there is no limit to what we can accomplish for the good of the people of this state.
And of course, working together is something that his predecessor and Roy Cooper struggled with majorly with the General Assembly. Over 20 plus veto overrides in the final few years of Roy Cooper's terms, and it's remained to be seen. We are still waiting, obviously, for the General Assembly to be back later this month. Once they start passing legislation and start working on the business of the state, what that relationship will look like between them and former Attorney General, now turned to Governor Josh Stein. He then put a nice little bow on all of his comments, talking about his future for the state and how those things are actually going to get done. Here's the concluding comments from Josh Stein in Raleigh on Saturday.
My fellow North Carolinians, you have bestowed on me a great honor and a great responsibility. And whether or not I earned your vote in the past election, I am committed to earning your trust by working hard for you every day as your governor. With my faith guiding me and your spirit inspiring me, I stand before you today ready and eager for the work ahead. We must overcome the unprecedented storm that ravaged our state and the everyday struggles that impact our neighbors, and we will. After all, here in North Carolina, we have overcome fires and floods, poverty and plagues, recessions and racial segregation. When we see our neighbors stuck on a roof, we don't run. We build a boat and row. So friends, let us meet this moment and let's build. Let's build an economy that works for everyone and in every corner of this state. Let's build safe communities and strong schools. Let's rebuild Western North Carolina, and let's build a better and brighter future for our children together. We can do it, and we will do it because we are North Carolina strong. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless the state that we all love. Thank you.
It is set to be a couple of interesting years here in North Carolina. The power struggle between a Democrat governor and a Republican-led General Assembly. We'll be tracking all of those details throughout the year right here on the Carolina Journal and on our website, carolinajournal.com. It's now 5:44, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Another look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks, Nick and Wes.
Hi. Good morning again. It's 5:51. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals is now set to hear oral arguments later this month, January the 27th, regarding an election dispute with the North Carolina Supreme Court seat between Democrat Allison Riggs and Republican Jefferson Griffin. Riggs requested the case's expedited timeline, leading to the court to set a hearing date, and parties are required to submit briefs on January the 15th and then January the 22nd ahead of those oral arguments. The dispute centers on Republican Jefferson Griffin's challenge to the State Board of Elections regarding the counting of over 60,000 ballots. Griffin alleges that these ballots, including votes from individuals without complete registration details and some overseas voters, should not be counted. The state election board rejects those claims, but Griffin is now seeking a writ of prohibition from the North Carolina Supreme Court. That would block the certification of Riggs's narrow 734 vote victory. It was about 1 week ago that the state Supreme Court voted 4-2 to halt certification of the election, allowing Griffin's claims to proceed. Meanwhile, the federal district court remanded the case to the North Carolina courts, relinquishing jurisdiction. Riggs argues that the challenge undermines public confidence in elections and violates constitutional protection. She seeks a resolution from the Fourth Circuit by February the 11th, when the 2025 term of the North Carolina Supreme Court begins. Griffin contends that the North Carolina Supreme Court should handle the matter without any sort of federal interference. And as you can imagine, as we've covered over the last couple of weeks, this case continues to draw significant attention statewide due to its potential impacts and the balance of power within the North Carolina judicial system. Regardless of the outcome, Republicans will still hold that majority on the court. However, this will have an impact in later elections as current members term out and are unable to run for re-election due to their age. We are keeping a very close eye on that. Maybe some additional updates or details this week. We'll pass them along to you right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Destin Hall, who is now the Speaker of the North Carolina House of Representatives, has announced a formation of a select committee on Hurricane Helene recovery. With that, Hall said in a press release, Hurricane Helene caused widespread devastation across North Carolina, and it's our duty to ensure impacted communities have the resources that they need to rebuild stronger than before. This committee, which is bipartisan, made up of both Republicans and Democrats, has 44 members in total, all appointed by the new House Speaker, and is established under the rules of the 2025 General Assembly. The committee will assess recovery efforts, identify resource gaps, and ensure state and federal assistance is delivered to those who need it. Committee members will work with local leaders, emergency management officials, as well as nonprofit organizations to support recovery and rebuilding efforts. The co-chairs of the committee are Representative John Bell, the Republican out of Wayne County, as well as Representative Dudley Green from Avery County. The vice chairs include Representative Jennifer Balcom from Henderson, Mike Clampett from Swain, Carl Gillespie from Macon, Jake Johnson from Polk, Ray Prickett from Watauga, as well as Mark Pless from Haywood County. So all of those individuals serving out in the western half of the state. It was their communities that were ravaged by this storm back in September of last year. With that, Hall said, quote, "We are fully committed to work in western North Carolina, and we will see through recovery through the very end. This committee will play a vital role in providing the oversight and leadership needed to ensure strong and lasting recovery." The committee is slated to begin work immediately and provide regular updates and recommendations to the General Assembly. We are expecting another appropriation bill to be announced soon. The General Assembly is back 2 weeks from this Wednesday. As of right now, the GA has already passed 3 separate rounds of disaster relief funding, with more than $1 billion in state tax dollars appropriated for disaster relief and recovery. So you've got kind of now 2 different entities that are dealing with this. You've got, of course, the General Assembly. They are the ones that appropriate funds and handle the spending of money in the state. This group, this committee under Destin Hall, who appointed them, are going to be dealing with that from the General Assembly side. On the governor's side, you've got the new governor and Josh Stein with a new group that he has spun up called Grow NC. That organization essentially is going to replace NCORE, the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency. That organization had major issues and miserably failed in regards to hurricane relief in the eastern half of the state. There's been a lot of criticism of that organization, which was spun up under previous Governor Roy Cooper. So this new Grow NC group is going to be the one dealing with that, at least from Josh Stein's standpoint, out of the governor's mansion. So you'll see these two groups not necessarily competing, but handling different elements of that hurricane relief. We'll keep a very close eye on that, both of those things as they continue their work up in Raleigh. We are not expecting too busy of a week from the North Carolina legislature. Again, they aren't back until a little bit later on this month. However, we do get closer to the inauguration. That coming up 1 week from today, so we'll be tracking a lot of federal news this week as well. That's going to do it for a Monday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back tomorrow morning, 5 to 6 a.m., right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.